I've been carrying this secret for 3 months now. 3 months of waking up at night with my heart pounding. 3 months of looking at the sky differently. 3 months of knowing something that feels too big, too impossible, too terrifying to share. But I can't keep quiet anymore. What happened to me that night in the New Mexico desert didn't just change my life. It shattered everything I thought I knew about God, about Jesus, about why we're here, and what happens when we die. And if what I learned is true, and I know in my bones that it is, then everything changes. For everyone. Forever. Before I go any further, I need you to do something for me. Right now, pause and comment below where in the world you're watching this from. I need to know this message is spreading, reaching people in every corner of this planet. Because what I'm about to tell you isn't meant for just one person or one place. This is bigger than all of us. And if you've ever experienced something unexplainable, something that challenged everything you believed about reality and faith and the universe, please share your story too. Hit that subscribe button, because I promise you what comes next will shake you to your core. This isn't just my testimony anymore. It's a truth that's been hidden for 2,000 years, and a dying visitor from another world made sure I understood it before he left. The night was November 16th, 2:43 in the morning. I know the exact time because I'd been sitting there, parked on the shoulder of Route 34 about 40 miles outside Santa Fe, staring at my dashboard clock for nearly half an hour. Watching the numbers flip, unable to drive, unable to think, unable to do anything but exist in that hollow space between grief and numbness that had become my entire world. The temperature had dropped to somewhere in the low 30s. Desert cold is different from any other kind of cold. It's sharp, clean, relentless. It cuts through your jacket and finds your bones. My truck's heater had died somewhere around Albuquerque, the fan making a grinding sound before giving up entirely, but I hadn't bothered to stop. Hadn't cared enough to find a mechanic or pull into a motel. The cold felt appropriate somehow. External validation of the ice that had taken up residence in my chest. The silence out there was absolute. No cars, no animals, no wind. Just the vast emptiness of New Mexico, scrubland, stretching out in every direction, invisible in the darkness except where my headlights carved a small circle of reality from the black. Above me, the sky was impossibly clear, the Milky Way visible as a river of light, stars so thick they looked like someone had spilled salt across black velvet. I'd pulled over because my vision had blurred, but not from the darkness. From tears I couldn't stop and couldn't explain. My name is Michael Garrett. I'm 53 years old. For 30 years I was a pastor. Notice I said was. Past tense. Because the man who stood in that pulpit every Sunday, who counseled the grieving and married the hopeful and baptized the newborns, that man died 8 months ago. What's left is just a shell going through motions, trying to remember what faith felt like before it turned to ash in my mouth. I grew up in a small town in Oklahoma, son of a wheat farmer and a school teacher. Good people, simple people. The kind who believed in hard work and Sunday services and the straightforward gospel they'd learned from their parents. I gave my life to Christ at 14 during a summer revival, felt the call to ministry at 16, and never looked back. Went to seminary in Dallas, graduated top of my class, took a position at a medium-sized church in Albuquerque when I was 26. Met my wife Jennifer at a church picnic. We were married within a year. Sarah was born when I was 34, our only child. From the moment the doctor placed her in my arms, I understood love in a way I never had before. It was immediate, overwhelming, absolute. I would have died for her without hesitation. I would have traded places with her in an instant. That's what made what happened so unbearable. Brain aneurysm. That's what the doctor said. Catastrophic rupture of the anterior communicating artery. She was 19 years old, a sophomore at University of New Mexico, studying biology. She'd called me the night before, excited about a research project she was working on, something about genetic markers in drought-resistant corn. I'd been distracted, half listening while responding to emails from church elders about the budget. I told her I loved her, but I'd said it while looking at my computer screen. I didn't know those would be the last words I'd ever speak to her. The call came at 6:47 the next morning. Jennifer screaming, words that didn't make sense. Sarah collapsed in her apartment. Paramedics. Hospital. By the time I got there, speeding through red lights with my emergency flashers on, she was already gone. They let me see her, and she looked like she was sleeping. Peaceful. But when I touched her hand, it was cold. Already cold. And something inside me cracked like ice. The first month was a blur of casseroles and condolence cards and platitudes that rang hollow. She's in a better place. God needed another angel. His ways are higher than our ways. I'd said those same words to grieving families 100 times over the years. They'd sounded comforting coming from my mouth. Hearing them directed at me, they sounded like lies. By month 2, I'd stopped praying. What was the point? I'd prayed for Sarah every day of her life, prayed for her safety, her health, her future. God had taken her anyway, sudden and cruel and without warning. No chance for goodbye, no opportunity for last words that mattered. Just gone, like blowing out a candle. Month 3, I stood in my church and tried to preach about faith, about trusting God's plan, about the hope of resurrection. And halfway through the sermon, I stopped. Just stopped talking. Stood there at the pulpit looking at all those faces waiting for wisdom, for comfort, for truth. And I had nothing. The well was dry. The light was out. I walked off the platform, out the side door, and didn't come back. The elders were understanding. Grief does strange things to people, they said. Take time, they said. We'll be here when you're ready. But I knew I'd never be ready. How could I tell people to trust a God who let 19-year-olds die from ticking time bombs in their brains? How could I promise eternal life when I no longer believed anything was eternal? Jennifer tried. God, she tried. She'd come into my study where I'd sit for hours, staring at books. I used to love commentaries, theological treatises, devotionals that had once felt profound. She'd put her hand on my shoulder and tell me we'd get through this together, that Sarah would want us to keep living. That faith wasn't the absence of doubt, but the choice to believe anyway. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to feel what I used to feel. But there was just emptiness where God used to be. By month 6, I'd moved into the guest bedroom. Not out of anger at Jennifer, but because I couldn't stand the pity in her eyes when she looked at me. Couldn't bear the gentle suggestions that maybe I should talk to someone, see a counselor, try medication. She was grieving too. Sarah was her daughter, her only child. But somehow she still had faith. Still believed there was meaning in this. I couldn't understand how, and I couldn't explain why I'd lost what she'd kept. Month 7, the church officially placed me on indefinite leave. Compassionate, they called it, necessary for healing. They'd already brought in an interim pastor, a kind man in his 60s who'd recently retired. He stopped by the house once, tried to pray with me. I let him finish, thanked him, and never answered the door again when he knocked. That's how I ended up on that highway at 2:43 in the morning, on November 16th. I'd been driving for 6 hours, no destination, no purpose. Just driving because sitting still meant thinking, and thinking meant drowning. The desert seemed appropriate. Empty. Barren. A landscape that matched my interior world. I was reaching for the keys, about to start the engine and keep driving until the sun came up or I ran out of gas, whichever came first when I saw the light. At first, my brain tried to categorize it as something normal. A plane, maybe, or a satellite. But planes don't move like that. They don't cut across the sky at impossible angles. leaving trails of light that shimmer and pulse like living things. They don't suddenly change direction mid-flight, jerking sideways in a way that defies every law of physics. This thing, this light, was descending. Fast. It was coming from the northwest, a brilliant point of white-blue radiance that grew larger as it dropped toward the horizon. And it wasn't just light. There was something else, something my eyes couldn't quite process. The air around it seemed to ripple, like heat waves rising from summer asphalt. Except this was cold, and the distortion was moving with the light. I watched, frozen, as it disappeared below the horizon line. For 3 seconds, there was nothing. And then the desert lit up like someone had detonated a flashbang on the ground. Pure white light that turned night into noon for a fraction of a second before fading. The sound came next. Not an explosion. Nothing like an explosion. This was deeper, more resonant. A thud that I felt in my sternum, in my teeth, in the hollow spaces of my bones. Like the earth itself had been struck by something massive enough to make it ring like a bell. Every logical part of my brain was screaming at me to start the truck and leave, to get back on the highway and drive until whatever that was became someone else's problem. But logic had stopped working for me months ago, and there was something else, something pulling at me from that direction. Not curiosity exactly, more like recognition, like whatever had just crashed out there in the dark had been meant for me to find. I opened the door. The cold hit me immediately. Desert air so dry it seemed to pull moisture from my lungs. I grabbed my phone from the cup holder, turned on the flashlight, and started walking. Climbed over the guardrail and headed into the scrubland, following the direction where I'd seen the light fall. The ground was rocky and uneven, covered in low brush that grabbed at my jeans. In the darkness, lit only by my phone's narrow beam and the wash of moonlight, every step felt uncertain. I could have twisted an ankle, stepped on a snake, walked off a ledge. I didn't care. I'd stopped caring about self-preservation somewhere around month 5. The smell hit me first. Acrid, sharp, wrong. Like burning metal mixed with ozone, mixed with something organic I couldn't identify. It made my eyes water and my throat close up. I pulled my collar up over my nose and kept walking. I found it in a shallow depression, maybe 15 minutes from where I'd parked. The craft, and it was clearly a craft, clearly not from here, was small, maybe the size of a Honda Civic, partially buried in the sand where it had impacted. But calling it a craft makes it sound mechanical, manufactured. This looked grown, organic. The surface was textured like bone or coral, white and faintly luminescent, covered in patterns that seemed to shift when I looked at them directly. Sections were still glowing with a pulsing blue light that made the air shimmer with heat. My hands were shaking. My heart was slamming against my ribs so hard it hurt. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. But I was looking at it, close enough now to touch it. And reality was bending around what my eyes were showing me. There was an opening on the side facing me, ragged and torn, edges still glowing orange like cooling metal. And from inside that opening, I heard something that made me forget about impossibility and fear and every rational objection my mind was throwing up. A breath. Wet, rattling, desperate. Someone was alive in there. I don't know what made me move forward. Some deep instinct, maybe. Some part of me that was still a pastor, still a helper, still capable of responding to suffering even when I'd become numb to my own. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe I just couldn't walk away from a dying thing, no matter what it was. I knelt at the opening and shined my light inside. The being was like nothing I'd ever imagined, nothing I'd seen in movies or read in books. Humanoid in the loosest sense, head, torso, limbs. But all the proportions were wrong. Too tall, too thin, limbs that were too long and jointed in places that didn't make anatomical sense. The skin was translucent, almost glass-like, and underneath I could see networks of light. Not blood vessels, but something else. Channels that pulsed with bioluminescence like fiber-optic cables carrying data. The head was larger than a human's, elongated, with features that suggested eyes and a mouth but didn't quite match up. And those eyes, massive and dark and already dimming, they turned toward me as I leaned in. Intelligence there. Awareness. Pain. There was a wound in its torso, a jagged tear about 8 inches long. Something was leaking from it, thick and luminescent, pooling on the floor of the craft. The light in that substance was fading, dimming from bright blue to a sickly gray. And I knew, without understanding how I knew, that this was blood. This was its life draining away. For 3 seconds, we just looked at each other. A human and an alien. A broken pastor and a dying visitor. 2 conscious beings who should never have met, staring at each other in the darkness of the New Mexico desert. And then it spoke. Not with sound. There was no movement of the mouth, no vibration in the air, but the word appeared in my mind, clear and distinct and undeniable, bypassing my ears entirely and manifesting directly in my consciousness. Help. That single word carried everything. Desperation, hope, pain, fear, and underneath it all, something else, something like recognition, as if it had been looking for me specifically, as if our meeting wasn't an accident. I didn't hesitate. I reached into that craft, my hands closing around limbs that felt too cold and too light, like handling something made of hollow glass. It made sounds, not words, just expressions of pain, but it didn't resist. Between us, somehow, we got it out of that craft and onto the sand. The moonlight showed me details I'd missed in the confines of the vessel. The being was easily 6.5 feet tall, even collapsed on the ground. Its limbs were impossibly delicate. 3 fingers on each hand that were twice as long as human fingers. The translucent skin revealed more of those light channels underneath, a complex network that looked almost like circuitry. And that wound in its torso was worse than I'd thought. The substance leaking from it had slowed, but the light in the channels was fading, retreating from the extremities, pulling back toward the core like a dying star collapsing into itself. I pulled off my jacket without thinking, pressed it against the wound. Basic first aid, the kind I'd learned decades ago for youth mission trips. None of the training had covered alien physiology, but the principle was the same. Stop the bleeding. Keep pressure on the wound. I had no idea if it would help, but I had to do something. "I don't know how to help you," I said out loud, my voice strange in the vast silence. "I don't know what you need." The being's hand, if that's what you called it, lifted slowly and touched mine where I was pressing the jacket against its wound. 3 long fingers, cold and trembling, making contact with my skin. And the world disappeared. I wasn't in the desert anymore. I was standing in space. No, not space exactly. Somewhere between space and thought, a place where physical location didn't apply. I could see Earth below me, small and blue and achingly beautiful, wrapped in swirls of white cloud. But I could also see further, see deeper. Galaxies spreading out in every direction, not as distant points of light, but as living structures, breathing and pulsing, connected by threads of something that looked like light but felt like meaning. And I understood, without words, what I was seeing. This wasn't my imagination. This was his memory. He was showing me, letting me see what he saw. "We have been watching," the voice said in my mind, clearer now. Not words exactly, but concepts that my brain translated into language. "For so long. Searching. Hoping." Watching what? I thought back, and somehow he heard me. I felt his acknowledgement. for the proof, for the confirmation, for evidence that consciousness has meaning. Images flooded through me then, overwhelming in their complexity. I saw worlds I had no name for, civilizations spanning galaxies. Some were primitive beings just learning to use tools, just starting to look at their skies and wonder. Others were advanced beyond anything I could comprehend. Structures that bent space, ships that moved between stars like fish through water, technologies that made our greatest achievements look like children playing with sticks. But they all shared something. Every civilization, every species, every conscious being from one end of the universe to the other. They all looked up. They all asked questions. Am I alone? Does anything care? Is there purpose, meaning? Or is consciousness just a cosmic accident, a brief flicker of complexity in an indifferent universe? We are all searching, he said, and I felt the weight of it. All of us. In every corner of everything that exists, we build, we grow, we learn. We reach heights of knowledge and technology that should be impossible. But we all reach the same darkness, the same question that no amount of science can answer. What happens when consciousness ends? Where do we go? Or do we just stop? The vision shifted. I saw his world now, or what I assumed was his world. 3 suns hanging in a sky that shimmered with colors I'd never seen, colors my brain had to invent names for because human language had no words for them. Structures that looked like they were made of crystal and light, soaring impossibly high. Beings like him, thousands of them, moving through spaces that defied geometry, living lives of complexity and beauty. But underneath the beauty, I felt their pain, their uncertainty. They had conquered their solar system, had sent missions to other stars, had built wonders that would make human civilization look like insects building anthills. And still, they were afraid. Afraid of death. Afraid of meaninglessness. Afraid that when their lights went out, there would be nothing, just void, just ending. We are old, he said, and I felt the weight of eons in those words. Our civilization has existed for what you would measure as millions of your years. We have seen empires rise and fall. We have catalogued 10,000 worlds with life, 500 with intelligence, 73 with technology capable of space travel. We have accumulated knowledge that would take your species 1,000 lifetimes to comprehend. And yet we cannot answer the one question that matters. Is consciousness eternal? Or is death the end? The pressure on my jacket increased. I realized we were back in the desert, the vision fading, but his eyes held mine with desperate intensity. His breathing was getting shallower. 2,000 of your years ago, he continued, and something in his mental voice changed, became sharper, more urgent. We detected something, an anomaly. Not in physical space, but in the fabric of consciousness itself. A rupture, a wave that spread from one small world in an unremarkable galaxy, your world. My chest tightened. I knew what he was going to say before he said it. Somehow, I knew. Something impossible happened here. Something that shouldn't work according to any laws we understand. But it did. It does. And every advanced civilization in this region of the galaxy felt it, like a frequency that resonated through the fabric of reality itself. What was it? I whispered, even though I already knew. Had to hear him say it. The Creator entered the creation, he said, and the words resonated in my mind like thunder. God became matter, became flesh, became subject to pain and time and death. The infinite became finite, the eternal became temporal. And when it happened, when he died on your cross, the energy signature reached across all of space. Jesus, I breathed. The name felt different in my mouth now. Bigger, heavier. Yes, you're Jesus, but you don't understand what he is, what he did, what it means. The being coughed, a wet sound, and more of that luminescent substance leaked from the wound despite my pressure. Your species has spent 2,000 years arguing about details, about doctrine, about who's right and who's wrong. But you're missing the magnitude of what happened, the cosmic significance. Tell me, I said. My voice was shaking. Please, I need to understand. The being's hand tightened on mine, and another surge of images flooded my consciousness. I saw the Earth from space 2,000 years ago, saw a specific moment, a specific place, a hill outside Jerusalem, 3 crosses against a darkening sky. And then I saw what happened when he died. A pulse, a wave, starting from that specific point in space and time and expanding outward at speeds that made light look stationary, not electromagnetic radiation. Something else, something that existed in dimensions my brain couldn't visualize, could only feel. And that wave carried information, a message encoded in the fabric of reality itself. Death is defeated. Consciousness is eternal. Love is the fundamental force. I saw that wave spread past the solar system, past the nearest stars, past everything familiar. Saw it reach civilizations that were watching the sky, that were searching for meaning, that were desperate for confirmation that they weren't alone. And I felt their response. Shock, confusion, hope, terror, because the wave brought proof. Undeniable, measurable, scientific proof that consciousness could survive the death of the body, that there was something beyond, that the universe wasn't meaningless after all. We felt it, the being said. Civilizations a billion light-years away felt it. The barrier between creator and creation broke, not just for your species, for everyone, for all consciousness everywhere. Because love, true love, divine love isn't bound by physics, isn't limited by space or time. When God chose to experience death as one of his creations, he bridged the gap for all creation. I was shaking. My entire body was trembling, and I couldn't tell if it was from cold or shock or something else. But why? The question came out as a sob. Why would God do that? Why become mortal? Why die? The being's eyes were dimming. I could see the light fading, retreating. But his mental voice was clear, urgent, like he needed to make me understand before he ran out of time. Because isolation is the greatest suffering in existence. Because every conscious being, everywhere, human or otherwise, experiences the terror of being alone in the dark. The fear that when we die we simply stop, that no one cares, that we're accidents, mistakes, glitches in an indifferent universe. And he, your God, our God, the God of everything, he couldn't bear it. Tears were streaming down my face. I didn't try to stop them. So he came here, to Earth? He had to become limited to prove it was possible to overcome limitation. He had to enter time to show that time isn't the end. He chose one world, one moment, one form. But the message wasn't just for you. When you die, when you see what comes next, you'll understand. The resurrection wasn't a one-time miracle. It was the initialization code for a new reality. A frequency that all consciousness could tune into. He showed you first, so you could show others. But we failed, I said. The words tasted bitter. We've spent 2,000 years fighting about it, dividing over it, killing each other over interpretations of what he said. You're young, the being said, and something like compassion colored his mental voice. Your species is still in its infancy, you're learning, but the truth is still there, underneath all the arguments. You felt it once. You can feel it again. I lost my daughter. The confession burst out of me 8 months ago. And I thought God had abandoned me. I thought everything I believed was a lie. How can I trust a God who lets children die? The being's hand tightened on mine with surprising strength. His breathing was labored now, each breath a struggle. But his mental voice was firm. Your daughter is not gone. Consciousness cannot be destroyed. It can only transform. The same power that raised your Jesus from death holds her now, holds all of us. Death is not an ending. It's a doorway, a translation into a different frequency of existence. How can you be so sure? I was sobbing now, couldn't stop. 8 months of grief pouring out. What if you're wrong? What if death is just death? I'm dying, he said simply. Right now, I can feel it. My body is failing, and I'm not afraid. Because I know what happens next. I've seen the data. My people have spent 2,000 years studying the event. We've measured it, analyzed it. The electromagnetic signature of consciousness that should have dissipated when your Jesus died, it didn't. It expanded. It merged with the fundamental fabric of reality. He became part of everything. That's what he meant when he said, I am with you always. Not metaphor, fact. He literally wove himself into the structure of the universe. But what about all the other religions? The question came from some part of me that was still trying to make sense of this. All the different beliefs, are they wrong? They're all sensing the same truth, he said, all feeling the echo of what happened. Your species has been arguing about details for 2,000 years, but you're all touching the same elephant, describing it from different angles. Some call it enlightenment, some call it salvation, some call it unity with the divine. But it's all describing the same thing. The moment when individual consciousness realizes it's connected to infinite consciousness, when the drop realizes it's part of the ocean. His breathing hitched. The light in his chest flickered. I pressed harder on the wound, but I could feel his life slipping away. Listen to me, he said urgently. I don't have much time. You need to understand. Your daughter Sarah, yes? I can see her in your memories. She's trying to tell you. She's been trying since the moment she died, but you couldn't hear her because grief was too loud, because you were looking in the wrong direction. What do you mean? My voice was barely a whisper. Consciousness speaks in frequencies your physical senses can't detect. Emotion, intuition, those moments of absolute knowing that transcend logic. You felt it when she was born. That overwhelming love that made no rational sense. You felt it standing under stars, feeling connected to something vast. You felt it in moments of beauty so profound they brought tears to your eyes. That wasn't brain chemistry. That was the universe remembering its conscious. That was God touching you through the fabric of existence. How do I hear her? The question was desperate. How do I know she's okay? Stop trying to think your way to truth. Feel it. Your species is too caught up in your minds, in your logic and reason and proof. But truth isn't found there. It's found in the quiet moments, in the spaces between thoughts, in the knowing that comes before words. He paused, struggling for breath. She's okay. More than okay. She's home in a way that makes Earth feel like a shadow of reality. And she's been trying to tell you. Every synchronicity, every moment of unexpected peace, every time you felt her presence, that was her. That is her. Consciousness isn't limited by death. It's freed by it. I want to believe you. I was sobbing openly now. I want it to be true so badly it hurts. Then stop wanting and start knowing. You're a pastor. You've preached about faith for 30 years, but you were teaching it as belief. Faith isn't belief. It's recognition. Remembering what you've always known but forgot. You are consciousness having a temporary physical experience. You are never just your body. You're a frequency of the divine, experiencing itself through the lens of individuality. And when this life ends, you don't disappear. You return to the source, like a wave returning to the ocean. The light in his veins was almost gone now. I could see it retreating, pooling in his core, his extremities going dark, like watching a candle burn down to the wick. "Don't leave," I begged. "Please. I need more time. I need to understand." "You already understand," he said, his voice fading. "You've always understood. You just forgot. Every longing for eternity you've ever felt, every hunger for meaning, every moment of love that seemed too big for your body to contain, that's not an accident. That's proof. The fingerprint of the Creator." And Jesus was God saying, "I know you're scared. I was scared too, but I went through it first to show you there's nothing to fear." Why did he choose Earth? The question came from some desperate part of me still trying to make sense of magnitude. Why us? He didn't choose Earth specifically. He chose to become limited, to enter time. This is simply where that timeline intersected three-dimensional space. But the message wasn't just for you. Every conscious being in existence now has access to the same transformation he demonstrated. Heaven, what you call heaven, it's not a place. It's a frequency, a state of consciousness, and he made it accessible to everyone by proving it was possible to maintain consciousness beyond physical death. "And you came here to verify this?" I asked. "Your people?" "We came to understand, to study, to see the place where infinity touched finitude. We've sent hundreds of missions to Earth over the last 2,000 years. Most of your alien encounters, the ones that aren't hoaxes or misidentifications, they're us, trying to comprehend how a species that witnessed God walk among them could forget the magnitude of what they saw." He coughed again, violent this time, and I felt his whole body shudder. The light in his chest flickered once, twice. "I'm scared," I admitted. "What if you're wrong? What if this is just wishful thinking?" "I'm not wrong," he said, and there was something like a smile in his mental voice. "I'm about to prove it. Watch. Remember what you see, because you're going to need to tell them." "Tell who?" "Everyone. Anyone who will listen, that they're not accidents, that consciousness is eternal, that Jesus wasn't just a good teacher or a prophet. He was God proving that love is stronger than death. That meaning is woven into the fabric of existence, that every single being that has ever lived or ever will live is held by that love." His hand went limp in mine. The light in his chest went out like someone cutting power. His breathing stopped, and for 5 seconds there was nothing but silence and moonlight and the cold desert wind. Then he dissolved, not slowly, not with decay or decomposition. One moment he was there, solid and real under my hands. The next, he was breaking apart into particles of light, like he'd been made of luminescent sand and a wind I couldn't feel was carrying him away. Within 10 seconds there was nothing left. Not his body, not his blood, not even a stain on the sand. Just me, kneeling alone in the desert with my jacket pressed against nothing, my hands coated in a faint shimmer that faded as I watched. I stayed there, frozen, unable to process what I'd just seen. Behind me, I heard a soft sound, a high-pitched tone, rising in frequency. I turned and saw the craft beginning to break apart the same way. The bone-white surface was fragmenting, dissolving into light that drifted upward like reverse rain. Within a minute, it was gone completely. No debris, no evidence, nothing to prove it had ever been there, except the shallow depression in the sand, and the memory burned into my mind. The desert was silent. The wind had stopped. The stars overhead seemed brighter, closer. And then I felt it. It started as warmth in my chest. Not physical warmth, something deeper, a presence, an awareness. And with it came a flood of something. Not quite memories, not quite visions. Impressions, feelings, knowledge that bypassed my conscious mind entirely. Sarah. I saw her, no, I felt her running through sprinklers in our backyard when she was 6, felt her joy, her absolute, unself-conscious delight in being alive, felt her love for me, for Jennifer, for the world. Then, later memories, her first day of high school, nervous and excited, her acceptance to UNM, so proud she cried. That last phone call, her voice animated as she talked about her research, how she was going to change the world. And then, after, I felt the moment the aneurysm hit, the sudden pressure, the flash of confusion and fear, but it lasted only seconds. And then expansion, like a tight room suddenly opening into a vast cathedral, like waking from a dream into something more real than reality. The fear vanished, replaced by, I don't have words. Peace isn't sufficient. Joy is too small. It was coming home to a place you'd never been but always known. She was trying to tell me, had been trying since the moment it happened. But I'd been too consumed by grief to hear, too focused on the loss to feel the presence. She wasn't gone. She was translated, transformed. Still herself, still Sarah, but larger somehow, no longer limited by physical form. Dad, I heard not with my ears but with that deeper sense the alien had awakened in me. I'm okay. I'm more than okay. It's so beautiful here. And I've been trying to tell you, I'm still with you. I've always been with you. I collapsed forward, forehead against the sand, and wept, but not from grief this time. From relief so profound it felt like drowning in reverse, like being pulled from dark water into sunlight. She wasn't gone. Death wasn't the end. Everything that being had told me, everything I'd preached for 30 years about eternal life and resurrection and a love that transcends death. It was all true. More true than I'd ever imagined. More real than anything physical. I don't know how long I lay there. When I finally lifted my head, the eastern sky was beginning to lighten. Deep purple fading to navy to the palest blue. Dawn coming. A new day starting while I knelt in the sand. Forever changed. My phone was dead. My truck was miles away. If anyone came investigating the light, searching for debris, they'd find nothing. No evidence. No proof. Just me, a broken pastor in the middle of nowhere, with a story no one would believe. But I believed it, because I'd lived it, and because Sarah was still there, a presence I could feel even when I wasn't focusing on it. Like a frequency I could tune into whenever I stopped trying to think and just allowed myself to feel. I stood up slowly, my legs stiff from kneeling. Started walking back toward where I'd parked. The desert looked different now, felt different. Colors were more vivid, even in the dim pre-dawn light. The air felt alive, conscious. I could feel the connection the alien had shown me, the threads linking everything. The rocks, the plants, the sky, the stars overhead. All of it humming with the same life that hummed in me. All of it held by something so much vaster and more loving than I'd ever understood. When I finally reached my truck and climbed inside, the sun was fully up. The dashboard clock read 6:17. Almost 4 hours had passed, though it felt like both minutes and years. I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, trying to understand what I was supposed to do now, how I was supposed to live with this knowledge, where I was supposed to go. The answer came, not in words, but in knowing. Home, back to Jennifer, back to the church, back to the people who needed to hear what I'd learned, that grief is real, but not final, that death is a doorway, not a wall, that Jesus wasn't just a first-century preacher who said nice things about love. He was God, proving to the entire universe that consciousness is eternal, and love is the fundamental force. I drove back to Albuquerque slowly, stopping for gas and coffee, trying to look normal even though I felt like I'd been turned inside out. When I walked through my front door just after 10 in the morning, Jennifer was in the kitchen. She turned, saw me, and her face went through shock and relief and anger and confusion in rapid succession. "Where have you been?" she asked. "I've been calling you all night." I was about to file a missing person report. I opened my mouth to explain, then closed it. How could I possibly explain? Where would I even start? "I need to tell you something," I said instead, "about Sarah. About what happens after we die. About Jesus." She stared at me. "Michael, what—" "I know she's okay," I said, and I felt tears starting again. "I know it, not because I believe it or hope it or wish it. I know it. She's been trying to tell me, and I finally heard her. She's not gone, Jen. She's just different. And she's happy. She's more okay than we are." Jennifer's face crumpled. She crossed the kitchen and grabbed my shoulders. "What happened to you out there?" "I met someone," I said. "Someone who came a very long way to verify something that happened 2,000 years ago. And they confirmed it. Everything we've believed, everything I taught for 30 years, it's real. All of it. And it's bigger than we thought. So much bigger." I spent the next hour telling her everything. The light, the crash, the being, the conversation. His death and dissolution, Sarah's presence, all of it, while she listened with an expression that cycled between disbelief and hope and fear. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "Do you believe me?" I finally asked. "I believe something happened to you," she said carefully. "Whether it happened the way you're describing or whether you had some kind of breakdown, I don't know. But you're different. I can see it in your eyes. You look like you did 20 years ago, before you got tired, before you started going through the motions." "Because I remember now," I said, "what it feels like to know instead of just believing. And I need to go back to the church. I need to preach again. But different. True." It took 3 weeks before the elders agreed to let me back in the pulpit. They wanted to make sure I was stable, that I hadn't lost my mind. I couldn't blame them. A pastor who disappears all night and comes back claiming aliens confirmed the resurrection isn't exactly reassuring. But I was patient, and gradually they saw what Jennifer saw, that something had changed, that the light was back. My first sermon back, I didn't mention aliens, didn't talk about spacecraft or beings from other worlds. I just talked about Sarah, about grief, about the dark night of the soul when God feels absent, and then about the moment when I realized he'd never been absent at all, that I'd been looking in the wrong direction, that consciousness continues, that our loved ones aren't gone, that Jesus proved death is defeated not just for humans but for all consciousness everywhere. Some people left. Some people thought I'd gone crazy. But others stayed. And more importantly, others came. People who'd lost faith. People who were grieving. People who were tired of platitudes and empty promises. They felt something in what I was saying, recognized truth, even if the words were strange. I've seen Sarah 3 more times since that night. Once in a dream so vivid I woke up gasping. Once standing at her grave on what would have been her 20th birthday, when I felt her presence so strongly I looked around expecting to see her physical body. And once, just last week, when I was sitting alone in my study at 2 in the morning, unable to sleep, and I felt her hand on my shoulder, felt her love, heard her voice saying, "I'm proud of you, Dad. Keep telling them." I've spent the last 3 months researching everything I can find about UFO encounters, about other worlds, about the cosmic implications of the gospel. And I've found something fascinating. All over the world, throughout history, people who've had close encounters with non-human intelligence report the same thing. These beings are interested in our spirituality, our concept of God, our relationship with Jesus. They're not here to conquer or abduct or experiment. They're here to study, to understand, to comprehend how we know what we know, because we're not insignificant. Earth isn't some random backwater planet in an unremarkable galaxy. We're the place where God chose to become mortal, where infinity experienced finitude, where the Creator subjected himself to death to prove death has no power. That makes us, and this specific moment in history 2,000 years ago, the most important thing that's ever happened in the universe. Every alien civilization that has ever looked at the stars and wondered, "Are we alone?" received their answer on a Friday afternoon outside Jerusalem in 33 AD. They just don't have the direct testimony we have. They didn't get to see him walk among them. They're studying us because we witnessed something they've been searching for their entire existence: proof that consciousness continues, evidence that the universe has meaning, confirmation that love is real. Jesus said, "I have other sheep that are not of this fold." I used to think he meant Gentiles. Now I understand he meant others, other conscious beings, other forms of life scattered across the cosmos, all struggling with the same existential questions we do. And to all of them, he is the answer. Not as a human concept, but as the incarnation of God himself, proving that consciousness is eternal, that love is fundamental, and that death is defeated. I'm not asking you to believe my story. I'm not even asking you to believe aliens are real. But I am asking you to consider something. What if everything you've been taught about Jesus is true, but smaller than the reality? What if the resurrection wasn't just about human salvation, but about cosmic transformation? What if God loved all his creation so much that he proved consciousness is eternal in a way that every being in the universe could detect? And if you're grieving, if you've lost someone, and your faith is shattered and you feel like God has abandoned you, I need you to hear this. They're not gone. Death is not an ending. The same power that raised Jesus from the dead holds them now, holds all of us. And they're trying to tell you they're okay. You just have to stop thinking and start feeling. Stop looking with your eyes and start sensing with that deeper awareness we all have but rarely use. Consciousness isn't bound by space or time. Your loved one isn't far away. They're right here, just operating at a different frequency. And someday, when it's your turn, you'll understand exactly what I mean. You'll see that death is just translation, like moving from one room to another, like waking from a dream. I still have hard days, days when grief hits like a wave, and I miss Sarah so much it physically hurts. Days when I question whether that night was real or some kind of elaborate hallucination. But then I stop thinking and start feeling. And she's there. Always there. A presence I can tune into whenever I need to remember. And I remember what the being said just before he died. You're not abandoned. You never were. The Creator is woven into every atom of existence. You're literally breathing him with every breath. You're thinking with his consciousness. You're loving with his love. You just forgot. I don't forget anymore. Can't forget. Because that night changed everything. Broke me open and put me back together with all the pieces in the right places. I'm not the same person who drove into the desert 8 months after his daughter died, drowning in grief and doubt. That person dissolved along with the alien in the sand. What's left is someone who knows, not believes, not hopes, not wishes, knows that consciousness is eternal, that Jesus was real and his resurrection was real, and it wasn't just for one species on one planet. It was universal, cosmic. The moment when God proved to everyone everywhere that death is defeated and love wins. 3 nights ago, I was standing in my backyard at 2 in the morning, looking at the stars, thinking about that craft, about that being, about the light fading from his veins. And I felt it again. that presence, that warmth. But this time it wasn't Sarah. It was something else. Someone else, bigger, vaster. And I knew, with the same certainty I know anything, that it was him. Jesus. The cosmic Christ. God who became man and died to show us death means nothing. He didn't speak in words, but I felt the message clearly. Well done. Keep telling them. They need to know they're not alone. So that's what I'm doing. I'm telling you. Anyone who will listen. Everyone who needs to hear it. We're not accidents. We're not mistakes. We're not random configurations of matter that briefly achieved consciousness before dissolving back into nothing. We're eternal beings having a temporary physical experience. And when this body stops working, we don't stop. We translate, transform. Return to the source we came from. That's what a dying alien traveled across the galaxy to verify. That's what he made sure I understood before his light went out. And that's the truth I'll carry until my own translation comes. I don't know if I'll ever see another alien. Don't know if I'll ever have another experience like that November night. But I don't need to, because what I learned is already enough, more than enough. It's everything. We're not alone. We've never been alone. And we never will be. Because 2,000 years ago, God proved it in a way that echoed across the cosmos. He died. And then he rose. And in doing so, he opened the door for all consciousness, human, alien, everything to follow him through death into something greater. That's the message. That's the truth. And that's why I still tremble when I think about it 3 months later. Because if it's true, and I know it is, then everything changes. Everything. And when I look at the stars now, I don't see emptiness. I see home. Not just my home, but the home of countless others, all of them searching, all of them longing, all of them receiving the same answer we received 2,000 years ago in a place called Golgotha. Love is real. God is real. Consciousness never dies. It just transforms. Like Sarah, like that being in the desert. Like Jesus himself, showing us the way. And when I stand under those stars, in the quiet moments when I stop thinking and just feel, I swear I can still hear his voice, not with my ears, but with that deeper sense, that knowing. You were right, he says. You were always right. Keep telling them. They need to know. So I will. For as long as I have breath in this body, for as long as consciousness animates this temporary physical form, I'll keep telling the truth that shattered me and rebuilt me and changed everything I thought I knew. We are loved. We are eternal. And death is not the end. Jesus proved it. The universe confirmed it. And a dying visitor from another world made sure I'd never forget it. That's my testimony. That's my truth. And that's why when I look at the stars, I still hear his voice.